Welcome everyone to episode 4 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lori Beth Goldman. I go by Lori Beth on Facebook, and I am a psychotherapist, coach, and healer who is really on fire about transformation and healing for the sake of freedom and for the sake of healing the planet. And what this show is, and healing ourselves and healing the planet, what this show was really created for is that I really wanted to explore these topics with teachers and coaches and healers that, some of the top teachers, coaches, and healers, kind of in both on sort of the internet world and then just in our local communities. And I really wanted to look at transformation as being about experiencing more freedom, joy, and peace regardless of circumstances, as opposed to, going after thinking that we're going to experience those things by getting what we want in life. I feel like there's a lot of that message definitely going on in the coaching world, and that, once you have this thing, then you'll be happy. And so we're really this show is really about looking at it in a different kind of way, and in a way that's really about just creating more of who we are, and being more of who we are, and creating the environment to experience more peace and well-being. Experiencing more peace and well-being, period. Anyway, so today we have the great honor of talking with Ken Freed, who is a somatic coach and also an earth-based ceremony holder who has worn many different hats in his life. I am going to invite Ken to come on the show now, and then I will introduce him a little bit more and introduce the topic for today. So let's see. Ken, I can't see how to invite you on. Can you try to join for me? Do you see There isn't an option to bring you on the camera, so I'm trying to see how to do this. Can you comment, Ken? Whoops. You're not seeing the button to join, and I don't see the button where I can have you join. So let's see what we can do about that. It says guest viewers, but it's not allowing. I don't know why it's not allowing me to have you join me. Sorry for the technical difficulties. One thing, Ken, maybe I would suggest is why don't you go off and then come back on again, and hopefully it will allow me to then let you join. Can you try that? Thank you for your patience, everyone. I hope everybody's having a beautiful Tuesday as we wait for this. Ken, can you try to go off and come back on again? Now I can't even. There we go. Thank you for all of your patience. I don't know why. Ken, it looks like you're still on here. Are you able to go off? Yes, perfect. All right. Thank you everyone for your patience. I've had a couple of these happen as I'm just getting used to using Facebook Live and inviting people on here. So it says that we're adding you. But it's also taking some time. Let's see. It's saying that it's adding you, but it's not actually allowing you to come on. I have extremely good internet, so I don't know if it's on your end, Ken. Let's see. Thank you everyone for your patience. Okay, we will try again. So again, it's saying it's adding you, but there we go. Yay! We made it!
Oh my.
That was great. Welcome, Ken.
Thanks, Lori.
Lovely to see you here.
Let's take a breath together just to
Yeah, that
to
sounds
just
good.
relax for a moment.
Yep. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So happy to have you on the show. And just to give a quick introduction to Ken, and you're actually, your internet's a little on and off, so
It's a little
hopefully
slow.
it will work. Yeah, you're kind of a little blurry, but hopefully everything will come through. Yeah, now you're frozen. Okay, so like I said, Ken. This is Ken Freed, and he is a somatic coach and earth-based ceremony holder, and has also worked with family constellations. And I also know that currently you're involved in the somatic experiencing training, and he has a very, very unique background. He came from a background in mechanical engineering, and so he's been solving a lot of problems from the mind for a very long time, and then my understanding is that you have had a many-year spiritual and personal transformation that has led you to really move from the mind into the body and into presence in the moment. And today we're going to be talking, the title of this episode is called This Is It, and Ken is going to be sharing with us his approach to truly living in the moment and living with what is happening now and loving it. So you're frozen again. I don't see your face. Can you speak so that I can just make sure you're on here? Let's see. And he just went off. Well, hopefully he'll come back on in a moment. And what I'll say in the meantime is that Ken and I we actually met online, and I commented on one of his posts, actually a couple of his posts, and we started a conversation there and then took it offline. And the post that I'm remembering that here, Okay, he's going to join again. The post that I'm remembering that I was very, I'm talking about how we met.
Yeah.
I was just giving the opportunity as you were off, but I'll just say this quickly, which is basically that so Ken wrote this really beautiful post about how, there's a lot of talk on the internet about kind of coming into right alignment to create what you want. And what he was saying was that in order to really kind of create what you want, you have to shift the nervous system. You have to shift sort of the deeper patterning in the body instead of just sort of the thoughts in your mind and your limiting beliefs. And I commented on the post because I really loved what he wrote and the beauty of his language and how he described it. And I also felt like, and the universe feels much more vast and mysterious, even than that, as being sort of the outcome, of as being like the nervous system being the total barometer of us, getting what we want. And so, sort of relevant to today's conversation, because really what we are talking about is, like I said before, is, how do we land more presently in the moment, and what does it truly mean to live? And, I think all of us are always seeking peace and well-being and joy, but we often think that we're going to get it from the things of life as opposed to just showing up for each moment. And so Ken has a lot to say on this subject. So I've talked for long enough, and we will now, we're gonna turn it over to him. What I would love to, but anyway, so Ken and I we have spoken at several different points offline, and I had an opportunity to really experience his work of working in the body moment to moment, and just really respect his path, which I think is, he's really carving his own path. And so I hope he'll share some of that today with us so that we can learn about kind of, more about who you are and how, the kind of healer that you are, and also how you've gotten there. So it seems like that would be actually a great place to start in this conversation is, sort of, can you tell our viewers a little bit more about you, and give them a context of the healing and somatic work that you do, and if in that conversation you feel drawn to share some of your path, I think that could be really helpful and obviously also very interesting for us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Laurie.
Yeah.
So, since I was a child, I was always interested in science. When I was young, I was reading books on like quantum physics and string theory and Einstein, and I was just fascinated with science. And that journey led me to focus most of my like childhood and teenage years on science, math and science. And I would go on to school to study mechanical engineering. And as I share in my bio, I worked for NASA, for Boeing, for Spirit Aerosystems. I worked in research and development. My gift was problem solving. Like I had a knack for working in a group whose sole function was to be assigned to the complex problems that were that had no solutions, that were still unsolved, unknown, but a solution was required. And so I was in that group, research and development, and our job was to find solutions to like high-level problems in relation to like aerospace manufacturing. And what I didn't realize when I was younger is that I was actually hungry for spirit. But the best way that I knew to channel that curiosity was into science, because we're in a world that's saturated with this obsession with science in the left brain. And so I took my curiosity for the unknown, for the mystery, for spirit, and I channeled it through science and became an R&D engineer. And that journey in engineering helped to refine my mind and really like sharpen the faculties of the mind to solve problems. But as that journey unfolded, I began to awaken to the fact that this wasn't it for me. I wasn't happy in that aspect of life. Like in my career, working as an engineer, focused on math and science, it like wasn't doing it for me. And so through a sequence of events, specifically around health, like I was having a lot of health issues, those health issues became the gateway to getting me out of engineering and out of a left-brained approach to life. And those health challenges back in 2009 would take me on this journey essentially from moving out of the left brain into the right brain, out of the mind and into the soma and into the body. And so the journey at a high level has been ultimately like from science and math to the body and spirit, originally through engineering and now through spirituality, like actually grounding into the body and the body as the gateway to true spirituality.
So just your last statement, I'd love for you to share. What does that mean to you? That the body is the
body as the gateway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The body
So
is the gateway
there's, I spent years practicing and studying spirituality from books, listening to teachers, listening to podcasts, like guided meditations, mantra meditations. I was doing spirituality in the way that I thought was spirituality. And in a sense, it was action based. My spirituality was action based. I was doing things that were spiritual, and I was learning the language of spirituality so that I could speak the language of spirituality with other people and hope that they would understand that I was spiritual, because my capacity to speak the language that they were speaking was indicative of how spiritual I was. And so that is not spirituality. That is the conceptual, that's a conceptual idea of spirituality. Spirituality, the ancestral direct living experience of spirituality is experienced through the body. The body is the gateway to the direct experience of spirituality. It's not a thought being spiritual, it's actual direct experience that happens through our body, being in our body, the spirit being embodied in the body, and then being in the world with a body that has a spirit within it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, actually, another thing that struck me, and then we'll go more into the conversation, is having come from this background of left brain, mind, and then entering into more of the soma, right brain. How do you see them connected in a lived spirituality?
Yeah.
Because right now we're kind of creating a separation between the mind and the body.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, we live in a world that requires action, and the mind helps as a tool to facilitate action. So, it's instead of living primarily from the mind, and the body is secondary, which is how most of the world is living. They're living in their mind and they have health issues. They're not feeling how they want to feel. Their life isn't how they want it to be. But life is being experienced through thought alone. The shift that I see is let's say a polarity shift. It's living in the body and from the body and calling upon the mind in as needed as a tool to facilitate action. So we need our mind. Without our mind, we wouldn't be able to take action. It assists us to take action, is how I see it.
Yeah. So the mind, almost that it's like the mind is in service to the lived experience of the body.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. Yeah. And so many spiritual teachers talk about this. Like, instead of us being at the end of the leash and the mind walking us, it's reversing that. It's that we're holding the leash and the mind is on the end of the leash. And we tell the mind where to go, and we use the mind when we need to use it. But otherwise, we're operating from our body. And I realize it's loaded to say that, because when I say live from the body, immediately we want to go into trying to decipher and understand what that means and operate back in the mind. Well, the mind wants to understand what it means to be in the body, and it doesn't work that way. We simply can't understand what it means to live in the body with the mind. We can to a degree, but yeah.
Would you say that in your view is one of the reasons that it's hard for us to be present to the moment, and because we're sort of trying to live through the mind?
Yeah.
rather than the body.
Yeah, absolutely. The mind is on 24/7 until it's not. So, like, the direct experience may be a beautiful sunset. What is it like to be saturated by a beautiful sunset? For most people, their mind is immediately thinking about what they're going to do when they get home. The sun is setting, the anxiety is coming up. Now I need to do this, I need to do that. Tomorrow's coming, I have to get ready. Gone. And so, how much of the day is being lived off in the mind, in thought, rather than in the direct sensational experience of reality?
And so, in your practice and in your view, are there ways that you could see not only using the mind in service of the body, but the mind itself also being like another lived experience, that it may be possible to actually, the mind, I'm thinking about it more from like the perspective of like energy, like the mind is like, clouds moving through the sky. The mind is its own kind of energy.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of, because I'm still hearing, still hearing this kind of separation, right? Like of course we're in our discursive minds versus our lived experience. In your view, is there a way, I think that's the question, is there a way to actually kind of have a lived experience of the energy of the mind?
Yeah. So what I hear you speaking to is the mind body are essentially one thing. They're not separate. We think the mind is separate from the body and that the body is separate from the mind, and it would appear that way. But in fact, they're one and the same. So there's a lot of modalities that originated from the school of thought, like the bioenergetics work, which is essentially that there's actually a connection between the thoughts we're thinking and something that's happening in our body that we may or may not be aware of.
Yeah.
So as we build bodily awareness and awareness of what's happening in the body, as we descend into the body, we begin to see how that is directly correlated to the nature of our thinking. So as we descend into the body and come deeper into our body, we begin to notice our thinking, which many people aren't even aware of their own thinking process.
Yeah.
They're not even aware of the thoughts that they're thinking. They're just thinking thoughts. So what happens is we connect the dots and begin to notice our thoughts and can begin to change our thoughts because we're noticing our thoughts. And it's not even about changing them, it's that they change on their own. The nature of our thinking changes as we explore the body.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's reminding me of this quote that I posted of Jeff Foster's a while ago, where he was talking about, it's not, I don't know if you saw this, it's not really the monkey mind, it's the monkey heart or the monkey body that actually then infuses up into the mind, right? And then it determines sort of how we think that it's our mind going crazy, but it's because there's actually energies that are happening in the body that we're not making contact with. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's a beautiful description. Well, it's interesting because what we wanted to talk about in this talk is sort of how I think we're beginning to address the question of the importance of being in the body, or the importance of being able to live kind of moment to moment. But if you want to, I don't know if you maybe could say more about why you see it's important to kind of develop this relationship with your lived experience, as opposed to what I guess we'll say, since we've been talking about this, sort of the discursive mind, or the kind of the sort of distracted mind, we could say.
Yeah. There's so much we could speak about right here, and I suppose what I'll speak to is that in my experience, to live in the moment, which I'm still learning, to live in the moment, and still in the training to be in the moment. But the only way to be in the moment is to be in the body. We cannot live in the moment through the mind. And what I see, like, pretty regularly with the people that I work with, or people around me, or just when I look out at the world, is that most people who are on the spiritual path, who are doing everything in their power to learn how to be present and be in the moment, they're attempting to solve the problem of presence through the mind. And it doesn't happen that way. You don't learn to be in the moment by telling yourself, I should be in the moment
Mm-hmm.
right now. Why am I not in the moment? And
Mm-hmm.
start going into a thinking process about
Yeah.
being in the moment. The way that we learn to be in the moment is by going into the body. And so the spirit essentially is fractured through different experiences and
Yeah.
shows up as fractured thinking. So as we unravel this and return to integrating our spirit into the body, we're not trying to be present. We're not trying to live in the now. It's simply a byproduct of returning to the body. So the things that used to cause us problems, the things that used to stress us out or cause anxiety, or the things that would consume our thoughts, they're not there anymore. Not because we've done
Yep.
anything to eliminate them, but because as a byproduct of returning to our body, we have fundamentally changed the fabric of our internal landscape, which is reflected
Mm-hmm.
in the nature of the mind.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a beautiful description. And, I love this idea of like the spirit being fractured, right? So then you're talking about the more we're in the body, the more that we actually have to feel the traumas and the wounds and the places that we've, pushed aside that obviously we did to survive when we were young. They all kind of come back in this practice of being fully present, right? And then that allows for us to begin to feel what we actually are feeling and begin to heal, and integrate that so that there is more wholeness. We're more integrated and our minds become more integrated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well stated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
And so, I mean, yeah, I know that we were going to talk some on this in this interview. I mean, we're flowing with it, so here we are, which is perfect. And I know we were going to talk about. I mean, you've sort of already answered it, but I guess just wanting to give a chance. This that sort of to talk about the importance of kind of being in the now, and how we often sort of how that, I mean, maybe you can extend upon that, but like how that can create, you've sort of already said it, but I just want to like at least be able to really hone in on it, but how that can create more true happiness, peace, and well-being and joy versus what we often think will bring us that, right? Which is,
Yeah.
and which you and I've talked about quite a bit, which is like, sort of trying to get somewhere, whether it's like trying to heal something or, when we talked, you were like, trying to get that best orgasm or trying to, have that sort of peak experience.
Yeah.
So if you could speak a little bit some to
Sure.
that.
Yeah, the way I think of it is, and maybe this is because of my background, everyone has some master equation that is their life. And there's all these variables. And it's this complex equation, and the older you get, the more complex it gets. And it's all these variables equals happiness, peace, joy, ease, relaxation. And so the variables grow as the conditions change, as circumstances change, as we get older, as our bank account changes, as our kids grow up, as we lose partners, relationships change. Like the equation is constantly changing. And most people are doing everything in their power through the use of the mind to figure out how to solve the equation to get that happiness, joy, peace, ease, etc., whatever's on the other side of the equation. And this is how most people are living, and it's not their fault. It's because this is how our society has trained us to believe we achieve what we desire. This doesn't work. And I know because I was on that path for a long time, and I suffered. I was suffering for so long, living in my own little hell with an equation that was only getting more complex, with a masterful mind attempting to solve an ever-growing equation. And I did drive myself crazy. I drove myself crazy, eventually realizing this is not how it works. This doesn't work. So what works then? How do we do it? Essentially, it's in coming to realize that that doesn't work. And so if that doesn't work, then what else is there? it's facing, which is what what we talked about. It's facing what is, realizing that there's nothing I could do to solve this equation. There's no amount of money, there's no amount of cars, there's no amount of trips, vacations, orgasms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that can solve this equation. And I would argue that if someone believes there is a way to solve the equation in that way, there's a certain degree of distortion in the field of thinking. At some point, life by choice or by divine destiny brings us to facing what is. And for many people, that's through some sort of crisis, some crossroads, leaving a job, leaving a partnership, leaving a place you've been living for most of your life, the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship. These sorts of things bring us like face to face with what is. And we can either run away and run out of the experience, which is understandable to do so if we haven't done the work to actually have the nervous system capacity to face what life is showing us is here. Or it's actually to begin the journey of, I need to face my life and feel the things that I don't want to feel, like you were saying. And that's intense work, and it takes immense courage and strength to really lean into the fire and to say, this is here, this is what's present, this grief, this sorrow, this sadness, you know, these intense emotions that we don't want to feel. We want to pretend like they're not there and go back to like trying to solve the equation and plan our next vacation.
Well, part of what I'm hearing you say is that, and I think we're obviously all trained this way in our culture, but and in society, the world as a whole now, you know, but is that it's like, oh, I can get the things that I want in my life through my mind, through solving them, and then to the degree of which that works, people are sort of believing that, and there is a kind of relative happiness that some people experience in that. So I'm curious, sort of, you know, what your experience of that, because right then when you face what you're talking about, you have to face that crossroad or that crisis. You're put in touch with kind of a new reality, and I'm curious if you can both speak to, like, in those two scenarios, right? Like the sort of first one where you can solve everything with the mind and life seems to be going well and you're getting what you want. Like, what do you imagine, what do you know, even for yourself or just the people that you've worked with, you know, or friends, what that inner experience is versus opening to those crises and crossroads that do force you to come face to face with reality. And in coming face to face with reality, you're coming face to face with all of your, you know, somatic experience and your traumas and your wounds and, you know, and all your sort of identities and beliefs about life. Yeah,
it's an amazing question. So, and I know both ways, so I'll speak to them through my own direct experience, which is when we're attempting to experience a certain degree of relative happiness through the solving of the riddle, the problem with that is that it's dependent on our capacity to control the future. We set the equation in motion. When this happens, when this happens, when this happens, when this happens in the future, then I'll have the happiness. The problem is we're not in control of the future. And for as long as we are believing that we're in control of the future, we're living in, as our meditation teacher Reggie Ray would say, we're living in wishful thinking. And wishful thinking is distortion, essentially. It's living disconnected from reality, because a lot of people had a lot of ideas about their retirement on September 10th, 2002. Was it 2002 or 2001? 9/11.
2001.
2001, thank you. A lot of people had a lot of ideas about their retirement. And then 9/11 happens and the stock market crashes and suddenly 401ks are worth whatever percent they were originally worth, and now everything that was built on some aspect of reality staying fixed and controlled is no more. So there's a flaw in this way of thinking, and it's dependent on the world and a lot of things staying as they are, and we're simply not in control. We could delude ourselves into believing that the
Yeah.
world out there isn't changing, but the deeper you go on the journey back into the body, the more you come to realize that all we live in is a world of endless change. There is nothing that is like fixated. So there's that. So the other option is to realize that, to know that, then what else can we do? The only thing to do is to face what is, to face the fundamental changing nature of reality, to face the fact that we don't know that our partner is going to be here 6 months from now to go on that
Yeah.
vacation with us, because they may get sick and something may happen. We don't know what's going to happen with the stock market. We don't know when the climate stuff, when there's going to be an earthquake and we're going to have to evacuate. Like, we don't know. So facing the unknown out there can only happen to the degree that we're able to face the unknown within ourselves. And the unknown within ourselves is all of those things that come up
Yeah.
when we actually look into
Yeah.
this moment and what's alive for us.
Well, so I have two questions. One is, how does that, we'll start with this one.
Yeah.
How does that fundamentally give one, or, any of us, a different experience of living?
Yeah.
Like, what is the quality of that experience? And actually, that relates to my other question, so I'll just name it and then maybe you'll weave them in, which is like, I know for myself what it feels like to live in the, like, oh, if I only had this, there's a kind of tightness and a kind of, I don't fully feel like I'm like alive and intimate to the moment, versus this other way that you're speaking of facing the unknown, being with reality that not only heals by its very nature, right? You don't even have to do anything. You just show up for it, which then can clear things in our being, but also, opens us to, in my experience, it's like the vastness of the body, the vastness of the present moment is so much richer than any idea or belief I have about life and the future. Like, it only is now.
Yeah.
So I'm just, anyway, I sort of,
Yeah.
to some degree, answered my own question. And I would love to hear, kind of just to really your experience of that, and then to hone in the point of why it's so important to live in this way.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind, the most significant shift between the two, is the elimination of fear. It's moving out of the experience of fear, because most people don't know what it's like to live without fear, so they live with fear. And the journey, of course there's fear. We're scared of something. We think it's something out there, but it's actually what's inside. So as we turn and begin to descend into ourselves and face the mystery and face all these things that come up, and face ourselves and make contact with the parts of ourselves that we've been too afraid to make peace with, or even to acknowledge, the fear begins to dissolve. And so that's an interesting place to be, because if you want to talk about liberation, to me there's nothing more valuable in this world, in this time, on this planet, than to be free of fear, because we're teetering on collapse. And this is a whole nother subject of conversation, but at any moment,
maybe the next time you come up.
But what I want to say to that is that as there's a growing number of reasons to be concerned about the state of the planet and the way we're living on this planet, for me, I feel at peace knowing that I am eliminating fear and dissolving fear, and I live with very little fear at this point in my life. So even if a catastrophe occurred, I can't say what would be happening in that moment, but I've gone so deep into myself that I sit and I would just say, interesting. Now this is happening. Now this is happening. Now this is happening. And what's happening inside of me is this is happening. Great, let me go be with that and notice that. And so it feels like a golden ticket to the state of the planet, and the growing fear and concern is to go into ourselves, to the very source of ourselves, and face
Yeah.
ourselves, which results in the dissolution of fear so we can be in an ever-changing world
Yeah.
with peace in our
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah. Beautiful. You said that so well.
Yeah.
And then being able to face the world in the same way, because our inner experience, it's like the more we can face it in ourselves, then we can face the world, like you said, with peace. And also, in my view, this is kind of coming full circle, come back to actually being able to create solutions that work to create more peace and love on the planet. Because it seems like we can't really do that from the mind. We can only really do that from like an internal state of, having dissolved that separation and that fear.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. Trying to think if there are any more questions. I mean, it seems like we addressed most of what we had talked about.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah.
Just before we end?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for asking. From what I've gathered about you, you're passionate about transformation. So I'm feeling called to just say something about transformation.
Sure.
Yeah. I've been on the transformative path, essentially my whole life, but most especially in the last like 10 to 12 years, like 100% all in.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed among a lot of people that I interact with is many people think that they're transforming and changing, but everything's the same. The only evidence that anything is changing is the changing story about what's the same. So deep respect for those who are in those moments of life, and there's another way. And that way is to truly transform once and for all. And the true transformation happens, in my experience, when we begin to exit the mind and return to the body, which brings us in right relationship with the mind. So lasting, sustainable transformation and the transformation of external circumstances is possible. And sometimes it requires challenging our own thoughts and our own stories about circumstances.
That's beautiful. And I'm sort of curious if you could just say what do you mean, just for our viewers, like what do you mean about many people are trying to transform, but then they don't notice anything?
Yeah.
Like what do you see as that way that you see as sort of not actually producing that transformation? Versus the second part of what you were talking about.
Yeah, so it's back to what I was sharing in the beginning of this call, which is, let's say, studying spirituality, studying the meditations, watching YouTubes, watching TED Talks, reading books about spirituality, Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, whoever, name any person, Marianne Williamson, all these people, all these books, reading, studying, applying. But when a person takes, let's say, an assessment about what's on their heart, nothing has changed. So the same problem, let's say the problem is I'm unhappy in my relationship. And there's 5 years of spiritual study, and now there's an assessment. I'm still unhappy in my relationship. And now the story comes online of why things are better than they are. Well, things are better because we don't fight as much, there's less fighting, we go out to eat together more, he takes me on dates, like whatever the story is, there's a story that creates the evidence that something is different. But in fact, I'm still unhappy in my relationship. Well, then something hasn't changed. Because if you're still unhappy in your relationship, no matter what story you tell yourself, you're still unhappy. So, yeah.
Well, so what I'm sensing from you and what you're saying is that, I mean, you're talking about people transforming from the study of something and or even from trying, I mean, to use Reggie's words, I was just listening to him last night, I was on a long plane ride,
Cool.
But, trying to solve the problem, the relative on the level of the relative. So we can see if we can, I can see if I can translate that for our viewers, but, sort of, it's like, let's say oh, I have this relationship problem and now I'm going to try to do it this way and I'm going to show up this way for my partner, or I'm going to, I'm going to work with the triggers that come up for me, which is all really good work. But what I hear you saying is that you're talking about, like, it's like the true transformation is being with what is in the body. It's being with your experience and by simply being with that. And, you haven't said this in the talk, but it's like we've been talking about how healing happens, but it's also being with it without an agenda.
Yeah.
Like, we're not also going into it to be like, okay, now I'm gonna, there's always that. I talked about this in the last episode, because I know I think we all have that, like, oh, I want to heal, I want to transform. And even in that, that's another sort of discursive process, right? Like, that's the mind kind of saying, now I have an agenda, now I have a strategy, instead of actually truly being with the body. And in that, you're also in the unknown and in the impermanence of things, which is like, I don't know how quickly this is going to shift. Maybe it's not going to shift, right? Like, you're just being with what is. But so that's what I'm gathering from what you're saying, that it's not the other kind of transformation. It's both through study and reading, but it's also through kind of trying to potentially employ different things, like different skills and tools, which are great.
And to fix things, to try to fix things. That's the thing.
To try to fix things or to try to change something about yourself, versus being in this, like, practice of meditation and or being in the body and allowing the body to shift from that place. Not allowing the body, but being in the body and allowing yourself to have whatever experience is happening without trying to do anything about it, but be present.
Yeah. Yeah, and from that place of presence, we can then make informed choices that from an empowered place, sometimes with courage required, to step more into the unknown. Right? To expand the container of the playground that we're living in.
Well, and I love it, because another topic that we could, obviously you and I can geek out for hours together, and we have, but another topic maybe for another time would be, like, even decision making from that place, right?
Yeah,
because we tend to make decisions from our mind. But anyway, it seems like this is a good place to stop.
Cool.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show and be in this conversation with you, one of my favorites. And I'd love for our viewers to know how they can find you, and also any opportunities to work with you or programs that you might be doing right now.
Yeah, thank you. The best way to find me is to follow or friend me on Facebook. I write and I share those writings on Facebook, and Facebook's the primary way to connect with me at the moment. And in terms of working with me, it's very simple. I offer single sessions. At the moment, I'm not offering any long-term programs or contracts, and that's a very conscious decision on my part. I offer single sessions on a sliding scale, and I say that my expertise is crisis, crossroads, and catharsis. So basically, wherever you're at, whatever you're working through, like whatever's alive for you, that is the starting point for a session with me. And like I said, sliding scale, single session, no long-term commitments. And if you're curious or you want to learn more or you have questions or you just want to say hi, like, please send me a message.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
And once again, my name, to be continued. I'm sure Ken will be coming on again. So once again, my name is Lori Beth Goldman, and I go by Lori Beth on Facebook. And as I said at the beginning, I'm a psychotherapist and a coach and a healer. And currently I'm offering one-on-one packages that range from 3 to 9 months. And I have a couple of spots open. And the work that I do is really, it's very in line with what Ken has been talking about around really being present with your experience and being with your somatic and your emotional experience, being present with it and opening to it with a lot of compassion and love as a way to begin to dissolve the blockages that happen from traumas and longstanding wounds. And I also do a lot of the work that I do. I'm just really tracing your moment-to-moment experience leads us to the healing of your deepest core wounds. Obviously have a background as a psychotherapist, so my work, I see patterns, and I really help through presence and through compassion, but also through actually doing some sort of like excavating work. My own version of that, really release those pretty easily. And I also do a lot of work with the nervous system and learning your specific nervous system, and then being able to learn how to rewire that moment to moment in your life. So if you're interested in working with me, I would love to hear from you. And obviously this is on my page, so that's how you can find me. And yeah, next week we'll have episode 5. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I just invite anybody, if there are people who are interested in coming on the show and really relate to this topic, please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you and have a conversation about it. Okay, thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.